Hello and welcome to the Turtle Tracks podcast. This is your host, Brian VanHooker, and I'm here with Christopher Yost, the showrunner and co-executive producer of Tales of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles on Nickelodeon and now on Netflix. Christopher, thanks so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Hey, it's my pleasure, man.
I've had you on the show before. I really appreciate you coming back. Back then, we talked a lot about your previous turtle work. You wrote a lot on the 2003 series, as well as one episode of the 2012 series. I'm curious, before getting into the kind of the weeds of this new series, did any of the past Turtle work inform this new one?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think just having that experience with the Turtles and different versions of the Turtles, 2003 or whatever year it was a more traditional, kind of superhero thing, whereas 2012, I think was an amazing show, which I loved. And in fact, I asked them if I could write an episode because I was
Oh
just
man,
such a fan of it.
it's so good.
Um, but that was that was a big continuity show. They had one big storyline kind of going through the whole show, and I love that kind of thing coming from the comic book world. And it was a ton of fun, so I think it was good to have that knowledge of the turtles, and even the late 80s 90s series, just having watched that as a kid, and you just kind of put all this stuff in a blender, and you realize that the core personalities of the turtles are very steady, they're very much the same. I think that the great thing about turtles is people can always identify with one of them. It's
Hmm.
like I'm a Donnie, I'm a Leo, I'm a Raph, whatever it is. But in taking those characters, and it kind of tells you what you have to kind of stay true to, no matter what you change, no matter what you do, you got to stay true to that spirit, and stay true to who those four brothers are. And more than anything, they're a family, so I think that we also had the movie, that we're coming off of, so that was yet another version. And we're very much that version. We take our lead from the movie, and the tone and the personality is kind of baked into there already. But it's Turtles Forever, man. They it's I've lost my words now. They've been this successful for so long for a reason, and I didn't feel any real need to reinvent the wheel there.
Speaking of the movie, I mean, to me, the two most sort of novel things about the movie is the amazing artwork, and the other thing is getting four genuine kids to play those parts. Was it? I mean, what was it like capturing that? As the right. So you handle the writing part. Your other co-executive producer handles the art more correct. Correct. That's
Yeah, Alan Wan is my co-executive producer, co-showrunner on the show, and he's an
yeah.
incredible director, and he has so much talent with the storyboards and the artists and all that stuff. And we each do a little bit of everything,
Okay.
but largely he handles the directing and I handle the writing. And we've got Andrea Fernandez who's handling the art duties, and the three of us together kind of bring it all, you know, together. So, but we all kind of do a little bit of everything. But yeah, mostly I'm on script and story and voice recording and good stuff like that. I forgot
So
the question.
what was the, sorry, no, I interrupted my own question. What was it like capturing the energy of those
Oh,
kids?
right.
Like,
It helped a ton. At the end of the day, they're all young people,
yeah,
so they have a sensibility to them that feels real, at the end of the day, what Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg did on the movie with Jeff Rowe was they really put the teenage first
yeah.
more than anything. Yes, they're mutants, yes, they're ninja, yes, they're whatevers, but I mean, they are kids first and foremost. So despite everything, and the movie did it so well, it's just they just wanted to go to school, they didn't necessarily want to save the world or be heroes or ninjas. They just wanted to do normal kid stuff. And I think that we've carried that through where all of our stories, we focus on it from the perspective of a teenager.
Mm.
Yeah, there's killer robots chasing you, but what would a 15-year-old kid think about that? And I mean, I think that, all the kids, Brady and Nick and Shimon and Micah, they all get it. They are all so close to that age that it's super easy. We just kind of let them be.
Sure.
Like they kind of know the drill by now because they've done the movie. They've I think started on the second movie and now they've done a ton of this. Like they are these characters, so it makes it a lot easier.
Is the script looser in that way?
Like I think we have the script, and if in the moment, like if they have a better way to say this, because like I'm 50, I don't know the cool 15-year-old way to say that
Sure,
particular.
right. Like I didn't know what Riz was until I saw Mutant Mayhem. Like I don't
Yes.
genuinely did not.
Yeah, and they continually tell me that I'm too late to say words like that. I'm too old to say sus, like it just doesn't work. But they can do it, so like I will always ask them that there's a better, more natural way for a teenager to say this kind of thing. Do it, man. Like they're always going to be cooler than I am. So yeah, we tap into that all the time.
Very cool. I'm curious when you started when you got the show, what was your directive? Like I'm really curious about how big the sandbox was that you were allowed to play in, frankly.
Well, at the end of the day, like the movies are the movies and the show is the show, right?
Okay.
And Point Grey and those guys that work with Seth Rogen and his team, like, they're fantastic, but I mean, like, they are definitely going to do the movie stuff, So, like, like they set up Shredder at the end of the first movie and they've got
Sure.
TCRI and I'm perfectly content to let them do that, Like, I think there's enough stuff going on in the Turtle universe. There's 40 years of like characters and stories that we can tap into that's not going to mess with like the big three, like, or two, or whatever the number is, So, you're not going to see Shredder in the show. You're probably not going to see a lot of TCRI, but I mean, like, you'll feel the effects of it, like those things still exist, the turtles still acknowledge them. Um, but everything we're doing takes place after movie one and probably before movie two.
Sure.
So, like, it's not necessarily, you're not going to get a lot of Shredder because they haven't necessarily encountered Shredder yet.
Sure. Speaking of developing those characters, can you talk a little bit about how the Bishop story came about, and especially this version of Bishop?
It was funny because like Bishop was a character I thought of immediately, like as I worked on a lot of Bishop in the 2003 series,
Yeah.
and it was the character that I didn't invent, but I always liked, So like I knew that I wanted to do something that wasn't mutants fighting mutants, like just out of the gate. And I'm
Sure.
like, all right, well, you could do Mousers sort of, but like that was always a Baxter Stockman thing. And Baxter Stockman wasn't in play in that moment. So I'm like, all right, well, how can you do robots hunting mutants? Like, what kind of character would be right for that? And I thought of Bishop, pretty quickly, because then Bishop, like I always looked at Bishop's story in the first 6 episodes that we did as kind of like the origin story. And then like she will eventually become, like a bigger player with the Earth Protection Force and all that stuff.
Hmm.
Like as we go, which is still the plan, So like I think at the end of the day, like it was, what's a new take on this character? Like this is a much more grounded version of it, that wasn't necessarily like, like a Civil War soldier, that's lived for 100 years, or,
Oh, right.
like
That
I
stuff.
don't, yeah, I don't know that that would have fit in our kind of grounded, real-ish world,
Sure.
So it's like, all right, well, like the thing that we really tapped into is like Boston Dynamics. All those videos of like guys like building their robot dog and like knocking it over or hitting it with a bat or something to see what it would do.
Sure.
That's more or less like a version of robots that we could all kind of get behind to like, kind of fit into this world. So like, like Bishop is a robotics engineer that's like, making robots and like, they can lift a box, or they can, like hop onto a step. Like it's all very like now it just seems super lame and all that, but it's actually amazing that a robot can do that.
Yeah.
But when she, like, kind of like lives through the Superfly incident, in New York City and a giant kaiju-sized mutant like, stomps down into her life, she gets the idea that, these robots could probably do something more, that they could deal with this obvious mutant threat. Like the whole world has been fooled by these hero turtles, but mutants are inherently dangerous. And she's the only one that seems to see it.
Hmm.
So, like again, like it's not Bishop as, the fans of the series is, that have come before, would necessarily know. But, like it is our version.
I mean, Bishop's central directive has generally been anti-mutant, so I mean, it's still the same kind of comes from the same place.
It does. And I mean, like as Bishop progresses in the story, the hope is if we continue, she's going to come closer and closer to the Bishop that, older fans may know and love. But yeah, it's just kind of like a modern day refresh on it.
You also added in uh, Hun, Angel. I think it's Kitsune. I don't know how to say that name. Those were really great ones. I love that Hun. Is there anything to say about bringing those characters in?
It's so funny, right? Because we can't just do the same thing again. At the end of the day,
Yeah,
2012 Hun, 2003, like all these characters are so great and so beloved, but like if we were gonna just do the same thing again, we would just, keep doing 2012. Like it was a great show, people liked it, we'll just do more of that. But our mission statement more or less is to, kind of like recreate this world in the vein of the movie, So like having like a street gang that like, rips off FedEx trucks, that felt a little more grounded, like it felt like they haven't encountered the foot yet, like they haven't like, done all these things that we think of the Purple Dragons as doing,
sure.
but like everything that like I'm putting into the show, like it's almost like their day zero story. It's like their
Yeah.
their their pre-origin story, So like all of these things may still happen, like Hun as we see him today is this kind of like lovable idiot who like loves animals and like is only doing like crime and violence to basically like, protect his like, his friends on the Purple Dragons force, like Angel is like the super tough street kid that seems to be working for Kitsune. Kitsune, who's to say if she's a shape-shifting sorceress that works for the foot or not? I don't
Sure.
know. You know, will we get there? Maybe, but like in this moment, like we're in the Marvel universe, just to say it, like once Iron Man came out, everything that came after had to make sense in the world of Iron Man.
Sure. Yeah.
So like Thor probably wasn't like a Norse deity. He's an alien, from another world. And he seems like a god, but he wasn't necessarily a god, Like, how do you make all these things work in conjunction with Iron Man? So, like, what we're doing more or less is taking some of these ideas, and again, like, our goal is to have fun and entertain and lean a little more comedy than necessarily like 2012 or 2003 certainly did. So like our purple dragons are hopefully a bunch of lovable idiots, but it doesn't mean that we're not going to get to bigger, stories with them. But like in this moment, like we're just trying to do something different and to have fun with it.
I should mention that the Marvel analogy comes from experience. You wrote Thor Ragnarok, which is one of my favorite, like top two Marvel movies. I love that movie so much. So anyway,
Thanks. I love it too. And I mean, like I worked on all three Thor movies. I did a little bit of work on Thor 1. I co-wrote Thor 2. I co-wrote Thor 3. Like it was, I kind of grew up in the Marvel kind of like world. And I even started before that with the animation. Like I did a ton of animated series for Marvel and that's how I got my start. But Turtles it's I've always loved Turtles, I keep coming back to Turtles because I love it.
and you brought in Pigeon Pete, who I loved. That was my for those first six episodes. If I had to pick a favorite thing, I think Pigeon Pete being brought in was wonderful.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun with Pete, and it was one of those characters was like, like that was something that we could kind of like take a little more ownership of than necessarily like the Turtles or April or anything like that. So
Sure,
yeah, we had a lot of fun with Pete and got to do a lot of poop jokes. So it was win-win.
I have my Pigeon Pete toy grasped onto my turtle blimp over there. Like I
Is he
just
wearing like the pilot vest?
yeah, and he came with the aviator glasses or goggles too. It was cool. It was a great toy. And it was just like I was just I don't know, I love that character. Just such a dumb like character to include and it came from this one episode of the old show that became this mutant like it's become this crazy character that's always in the turtle lore, but it's like I don't know, he's always a lot of fun to see different versions of him. So
We're fans. We love Pigeon Pete. And Christopher Mintz-Plasse did an amazing job voicing him. Like he was incredible. Like Mintz as we call him, like he came in like we didn't know, but he came in so prepared. Like he utterly rocked like pigeon noises. Like he just like cooed the shit out of that thing. Like it was amazing.
I love that.
Uh, but yeah, he's been nothing but great.
Now getting into the second half, how did the East River 3 story develop? Where'd that come from?
Well, that was like we'd just done robots, so we are like, all right, well, then we can go back to mutants now. Like we've had a little mutant palate cleanser, but we wanted to kind of create something new, like what could we do that would that would, challenge the turtles and do a different perspective on things. So the combination was like there was a storm, like the storm of the century that was kind of like, be a problem for them all.
Hmm.
And then during the storm, there was this kind of villain plot happening. So, like it's like it was like I always envisioned as kind of like a heist, right? So like the turtles find themselves mixed up in the middle of like these three mutants that were doing a heist. And, like it was one, they were just trying to survive the storm. Two, they didn't really know these guys or kind of even care, like, that they were doing a heist. But, at a certain point, they realized that people would be in danger
Hmm.
in the city and that this would make all mutants kind of look bad. So like they find themselves because of course they're heroes and good kids. They find themselves wanting to like stop these guys, but at the same time they're kind of sympathetic to them too. So like it hopefully challenged them in a few different ways.
I love the choices made for those three characters specifically. Like what I liked about it, they felt like old Playmates figures, you know? They felt like you chose weird characters to kind of base these things on. So I really loved the choice of the creatures, how they looked. The all three of those characters are wonderful.
Yeah, we have images of like pretty much every original action figure kind of like hanging up in the office. So we've
Hmm.
got like, like Dr. Dr. L and we got Ace Duck, we've got like, like
Sure.
Sergeant Bananas, we've got all these characters and like not necessarily that we're using those specifically, but like, we try to be inspired by them. So they're all a little not goofy, but a little goofy, like the sensibilities of them are very like 80s, but like, what's the modern version of that sensibility? So like, things like Mustang Sally or Lee the Eel, like they're all just kind of they're fun, like we don't have to be, this as much as the original Ninja Turtles was inspired by Frank Miller and this Daredevil run and all that stuff. Like, we want to have fun. These are lighthearted, fun kids, or certainly this iteration of it. So like the villains, as much as Goldfin may be villainy, like he kind of loves James Bond movies. He's kind of goofy to look at. Like nobody's particularly worried about him.
Yeah, he's very
Like
small. Yeah. Yeah.
he's very tiny.
Yeah.
And again, like Goldfin, like I thought turned out great, and the action of it was incredible. But he was very much inspired by like like the Yoda Dooku fight or whatever it was. Like he
Oh, sure. Yeah.
just like flips out and like hops around, and he's an incredible fighter. He's like the rabbit from Holy Grail, like little fish is dynamite.
I love the simplicity of the name Lee for an eel. Like there's something about that as a writer. I just love that. Like no, we'll just call it Lee. Like that's I just love that.
It's so funny because like in 2012, Mikey was just in charge of naming everything. Like he always
Yeah, yeah,
named all the
sure.
movies I ran into, and
Such a
I
great
always
device
loved
to get
them.
those terrible names out there. Yeah.
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 So like in this version, Mikey just kind of makes fun of everybody else's name. Like, like he's the one that figures out that Lee was just eel spelled backwards and like
Sure.
it and just can't help himself. Like he's a comedian. Like he can't help but make the joke and it usually gets him in trouble.
Mustang Sally was pretty great. Like I think that was I don't know, I think the name, the bright pink paired with Trejo's voice and this sort of tough character. I love that character. That was great.
Mustang Sally turned out great. Like the visual of that character is fantastic. The action figure turned out fantastic. Like
Yeah.
it and again, Danny Trejo is just such a honor to work with him. But he came in and killed it. Like did great.
You were mentioning that the inspiration was some of those more obscure Turtles toys. Was there ever a point where you were thinking, "Oh, let's bring in some of the deep cuts like a Dr. L or anything," or did you know you wanted to make your own mutants?
In that one, I knew I wanted to make my own,
Sure.
but we've had talks about potential future episodes, and like, yeah, everything's fair game, and we definitely want to get into that stuff.
I think one of my favorite deep cuts is Walkabout the kangaroo. I don't know why. It was the coolest looking little toy to me when I was a kid.
I I have a lot of plans. I'll just leave it at that. But
Okay,
again, like everything's born from the movie, right? So like you can only go to certain wells so many times. Like some, villains can always like be after mutant blood so often. It's
sure.
just like some of the challenges, like all right, without ooze just kind of like out there, like how do you encounter these mutants? Like how do you it's like, it's creative like, handcuffs that, hopefully we'll figure out some cool stuff for. But I'm pretty confident we can do it.
So you're confirming the spin-off for Walkabout then to just
At 100%. Yeah. Walkabout miniseries coming 2026.
amazing. Um, anything to say about the scene? I can't say this word. Anemones, and I can't. Those guys. Anything to
Yeah,
say?
nobody could say it, so we ended up just calling them the Sea Enemies, and that actually came from like the late '80s show. There was
Really?
this, yeah, the turtles encountered like literally like a pirate, and he had a crew of anemones, and we thought they looked goofy and fun, and stole it.
Oh,
Yeah,
shit, you're right.
see, we do our research.
Wow. No, I didn't. I never connected it. That's amazing.
Yeah, and then the other inspiration for that was the like the Junkticons or whatever it was from the Transformers animated movie. There were these one of the Monty Python guys was the leader of it. He was like had the mustache, but they end up crashing on that one planet that's just like a junkyard planet.
Okay. It's
And then
been a
like
while since I've
the
watched.
what's that?
It's been a little while since I've watched the Transformers movie. I'm
Oh
trying to.
my God, I watch
It's
it every
great. I've interviewed the writer of it several times, but I can't.
really.
It's still been like 10 years since I've. Um.
Anyway, so
Yeah,
like basically so it's like, like they hadn't been mutants for long, only like,
sure.
6 months or whatever it was. So they basically learned to talk watching TV. So they all ended up talking like New York City commercials. So, because the anemones, for whatever reason, weren't as smart as like Goldfin or Mustang Sally or whatever. They're just like little minions,
Sure.
basically.
Yeah.
So, we had a lot of fun with them, or we tried to.
Is there any scrap plans that you wanted to talk about, or maybe not because they'll end up going into future movie or TV plans or anything? So I don't know. But is there anything you want to
Yeah,
say?
we don't have a lot of scrap plans. Like
Well,
yeah, like everyone was like super supportive. Nickelodeon, Point Grey, Paramount, they're all super supportive of the first two arcs. And then yeah, like I've been lucky that like a lot of the things that I've cooked up have worked out.
I do love the fact that this feels like a street level Turtles, like very much like I don't know. It's more about their personalities. It's not they're not going into. And I love the space stories. Don't get me wrong. I think that that's cool, but I think that there's something I like about kind of just staying on the ground for this that movie and the series that I really appreciate.
Yeah, I mean, like that was always like the goal. At the end of the day, the turtles always end up traveling through time. They always end up going to some other planet. They always do this, but like this version in focusing on teenage first.
Yeah,
Like their big mission in movie one was to go to high school. Like I think the more grounded version of it, you know, in a world where the only sci-fi element was ooze, mutagen,
yeah,
like what do you do? Like, like what else do you tackle? So like coming up with more personal, more human stories was kind of like the mission statement. And it doesn't mean that it'll always be that way, but right now, establishing these characters in this world, that was kind of like the marching orders.
I think there was a little bit of confusion because of the story within a story element, whether or not this was in the continuity. Are you allowed to confirm one way or another? Or like I took it as it was, but I don't know if I've seen some people saying otherwise. I'm just curious.
I think it's open to interpretation. At
Sure,
the end of the day, like, like the first arc is Leo, doing a comic book. So is
sure.
he, writing a comic book about something that he's making up or something that actually happened? Who's to say? The second one is, April's doing an interview and Raph seems to be making up a whole bunch of stuff for it. But, did it happen or not? Who's to say? Like I think that, within within our stories, you will see crossover. So like even though Raph is helping out April with her interview video, like Pigeon Pete's still in it.
Yeah,
Like the purple dragons are still in it. So it's almost like, like somehow like we're creating this interconnected micro universe within the universe.
sure.
So, whether the movie chooses to acknowledge it or not, or chooses to have Pigeon Pete show up or not, like, it doesn't really matter to us.
Yeah.
Like we're gonna do our thing. And like we're never gonna contradict the movie, but at the end of the day, like yeah, like the tales, that we're telling aren't necessarily restrained by anything right now.
Cool. Is there any particular, I don't know, like not so much a favorite turtle, but like was there any that you particularly like to that you found yourself writing towards more? Because I mean, all four of the turtles are great, and I'm a Donatello guy, but I feel like this Leonardo, I like the fact the movie's a little bit more Leo focused, and I felt like the first arc for the series was Leo focused. So is there any turtle that you felt yourself kind of gravitating towards for writing?
I Leo's always been a favorite of mine, even though I personally probably lean more Donnie.
Okay,
Like I think Donnie's voice, loving the anime, loving the sci-fi, like I've always kind of enjoyed that. So like I think that sometimes like we lean into Donnie's frustration more than anything else, that like his brothers don't get him, that like, like his brothers don't like the same stuff that he likes, and like he's kind of like the character that right now I'm leaning towards more.
sure.
Leonardo I've always loved just because like, the responsibility, like just the burden of like leadership and like, like his brothers just want to go hang out, have fun, but like if Goldfin steals that pearl, it's gonna be bad for all mutants. We probably got to stop him. Or like dealing with Raph, who just wants to fight everything, or Mikey, who's just messing around. Like he's trying to wrangle his brothers, and I've always kind of responded to that character. But this Leo is actually a lot more fun than the usual Leo because, like, like he kind of panics quite a bit. Like, like he's kind of like freaked out by this a little more. So like it's like, it's not just him being a leader. It's like you're a 15-year-old kid trying to be a leader and you're gonna
Yeah.
mess up. You're gonna mess up a lot, So like all four of these kids like screwing up and messing up has been the best part of the show. It's like I don't know how often you hang out with 15-year-old kids. I've got three of them. They're not idiots per se, but like they don't necessarily have the best idea first. They kind of leap before they look all the time.
Sure.
So like, and it's a lot of fun, like it's a lot of fun to be around. There's like a fun energy to it, but I mean like these kids kind of like learning and growing and again becoming the heroes that we know they're going to be is the best part of the show.
I think that's one of the things I like best about the movie, and then the show kind of also does this where like Leo, it was Leo wasn't just being the Cyclops of the group, right? Where he was like, it was like he felt compelled to tell Splinter what the other turtles were up to, and then he kind of got involved with the whole plot because he liked April. Like it felt like this is Leonardo, but here's a kind of a justification as to why a kid would act this way, which is really
Yeah.
nice. Like the Leo especially would feel special.
Yeah, like it's a more human motivation. Like it's an
Yeah,
understandable motivation. Like we all get it, like he's trying to impress the girl. We get that. That's a universal thing that everybody can kind of understand. So yeah, so it's taken like the normal character traits and personalities of the turtles, but just kind of putting that like more human, more teenage spin on it.
and what has the response been like? How much? I want to mention that you guys were nominated for a ton of Annies, so congratulations.
Yeah, we got nominated for 5 Annies, and as it turns out, people really like Arcane. So, it wasn't our year, but like honestly, like to get 5 Annies for like a brand new, show,
Sure.
like was nothing. I couldn't be prouder of this team. Like for storyboarding, for directing, for character design, for editing. Like it was, yeah, like we're super proud of the work. Like, like our backgrounds, our art is insane. Like it's just like it's such a gorgeous show. Um, our voice acting, like we've been so lucky to be able to have the cast from the movie like come and help us out. Like Io is a phenomenal, April and phenomenal talent. The kids are all incredible. And even like the guest cast from like the Mutanimals, and we got like Alana Ubach doing Bishop. We got Timothy Oliphant doing like Goldfin. Like it's just amazing.
Yeah.
Like, we
The
literally
coolest guy in the world playing this little character is so it's wonderful. Yeah,
yeah, like Pete Davidson came in and he's like, this is the easiest job I've ever said yes to. Like he loves turtles. Like,
that's
at the end
cool.
of the day, like we thought he was buddies with Seth Rogen. And he's like, yeah, no, man, I just love the turtles.
That's
And
great.
I'm just like, great. That's fantastic.
I think I'm all set here. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate this. This is great.
Oh my God, my pleasure.
All right, well, everybody, check out Tales of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles on Netflix right now, and yeah, just thank you for being here. I appreciate it.
All right, man. Next time.